YouTube bound community, Beach Boys fans, random people on the internet. My name is Giggens, and we are here today to talk about the Beach Boys' 1985 self-titled release, The Beach Boys, released through CBS Caribou Records. This has been something I've wanted to talk about for a while. I feel like this is a really important album in their career. I'm going to throw that out right off the bat here. A lot happened between this album and the previous one, Keeping the Summer Alive, 5 years earlier. This was the longest gap the Beach Boys ever had between album releases. And so much had changed. So this is probably going to be a longer video. So to start with, the Beach Boys in 1980, like I've said before, were a fractured unit at this point. Carl even went on record as saying this is one of the hardest times they've had in their career as a band and as people, and that he wants the band to move forward creatively. He wants the band to continue to write new music that breaks new ground and showcases them as mature, people writing current new music that strikes new ground. Whereas they hadn't done that for a while. They're kind of just focusing on the oldies act they'd become in the live shows, throwing in new stuff here and there. But their new albums just weren't as structured in a mature way as they had been in the early 70s before Brian really came back in the fold. When you look at albums like Surf's Up and Sunflower and Holland, these are albums by a band that had something to prove. They were hungry. They had a desire to show off their strengths and their merits and their qualities and their distinction to set themselves apart from other bands. By the end of the decade, it hadn't stayed that course. In the summer, it changed everything for them. And Brian coming back in the band changed everything for them. So by 1980, you've got a band that's basically fulfilling contracts just to go out and play shows as a very successful live unit. That said, Carl ended up leaving the band because he wanted to see the band grow. He famously said something along the lines of, when the guys care about 1981 as much as they did about 1961, let me know, I'll be back. He ran off to do 2 solo albums. Mike did his solo album. And in that time, 2 members of the Beach Boys had very, very life-altering events. Brian was humongous. He had gotten over 300 pounds in weight. He was extremely unhealthy, and the amount of drugs and alcohol he was consuming were killing him. And so basically he was fired from the group. This was orchestrated for a very long time through Landy and the Beach Boys. Landy had previously worked with Brian in the 70s and did get him back into shape, but Brian never liked working with him, and he didn't want to be with him this time either, but he was coerced to basically get back with Landy because they knew Landy could do it, which is a very challenging thing. Brian was going through a lot, living with a different woman, and the back and forth between the legal battles of there's so much I want to spit out at one time. The legal battles the Beach Boys were going through with each other and their management and the people involved, that was a mess. Brian was, like I said, living with this woman named Carolyn Williams, who apparently has kind of been lost to history here. And I guess some of the guys weren't really too fond of her, and they wanted to split that up, so they basically hijacked Brian and took him to Hawaii with the Landy crew and got him on a 900 calorie a day diet and got him down into physical, much better physical shape again. So he had a very rough time during this period as well. The medical testing that they put him through to get him to even see if he was physically fit to go to Hawaii was a lot for him to go through. And then, of course, Dennis. Dennis is a big part of this story at this point. In the early 80s, Dennis was falling apart. His alcoholism and his drug usage was just taking a humongous toll on him, physically, mentally. Everything about him was just sadly declining. To see the Beach Boy, the surfer, the golden god that was Dennis Wilson, succumb to his addictions at such a young age. He was like 39 when he passed away. So young. To see him in pictures in the early 80s breaks your heart, because he shaved his beard off and he just looked like a different person. At this point in time, he had also gotten together with a girl named Shawn Love, who claimed to be Mike's illegitimate daughter, who also, Mike said, no daughter of mine takes drugs, or something along the lines of that, when Shawn tried to get to meet him backstage at a Beach Boys concert one time and Dennis snuck her in. and they ended up having a baby together named Gage. And Dennis was just head over heels nuts for this kid. He'd sleep with him in bed, and they had like a really close, tight relationship. He was nuts about him. He wanted to talk about him to everyone. But at the same time, he was also homeless. I mean, he had people living with him at his house with Sean and Gage. And then, basically actually, I take that back. They were all living together with Sean and a bunch of their friends. And then once Gage was born, then they moved out somewhere else. I think they moved to a hotel, actually. But then things just continued to decline. I mean, apparently Dennis and Sean weren't too happy with each other, and he was going to file for divorce. And eventually to the point where I guess he was living like under a staircase somewhere. That's all he needed. He'd walk around, basically going to bars all the time, asking people for money so they can buy him a drink, or he can get his own drinks. Telling people he was Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys. Like, it's so sad. His end was so tragic and so sad. And then, of course, he, jumped off the boat there, Marina Del Rey, looking for things he had lost over the years, and ended up passing away under the water, under where his boat, the Harmony, had been docked for years. And they found him in the fetal position, which is extremely uncharacteristic of someone drowning. And yeah, extremely sad. That was the first major loss. I guess you can count Murray Wilson as one of the major losses too. And Murray was also a big part on Dennis's mind in the last few months of his life. I don't know why, but maybe that was just something he was thinking about, being a dad again or something. But that was on his mind a lot too. Dennis tragically passes away. The Beach Boys in early 1984 decide not to do their shows for a little while out of respect for Dennis and just getting their own thoughts together. But they did start coming together again to start doing more dates and kind of pick up the pieces of the band. And they were convinced Dennis wanted them to continue anyway, which I'm sure he would have wanted that as well. So they ended up doing their thing, and in this time they became known as America's Band, and they started playing the National Mall in Washington, D.C. before James Watt deemed them inappropriate, that they are a crowd that's going to bring drug abuse and alcoholism to the National Mall. So they got Wayne Newton to play one time instead, and eventually James Watt got the notion that the Beach Boys were pretty all right. They're not bringing that bad of a crowd in there, but they became America's Band. July 4th of that year, Ringo played with them, which is pretty cool. They also jammed with Jimmy Page at one point on a couple of songs on different shows. I think they played in Philadelphia together, and I think he did follow them to the National Mall for the next show as well. So this was definitely a group in transition. Right around this time also, their popularity started to come up more and more and more. David Lee Roth came out with a cover of California Girls with Carl doing the background vocals on it, which is pretty interesting. And around this time, they decided to do a new album. They figured that this was the time to do something different. And the Beach Boys on this album sound like a completely different group from the Beach Boys on Keeping the Summer Alive. It's a whole different band. Mentally, member-wise, and spiritually, and their confidence is different. You hear the Beach Boys on Keeping the Summer Alive, it sounds just like a bunch of guys there to make a record. And there is some great stuff on that album, don't get me wrong. It's got some really great tracks on it. This takes it to a whole different level. The Beach Boys on Keeping the Summer Alive are the group that had to make a new album to go out there and still play I Get Around and fun. The Beach Boys on their self-titled 1985 release sound like a group ready to strike out with a whole new hunger, a whole new desire, a whole new will to show off that, hey, we're still relevant, we're still here, we're still on top of our game. I don't care if we're all 40-something. This is us now. This is us doing something that we're strongly behind, that we feel could be the first step and the next step of many steps to lead us to a whole new generation of people. And that's definitely what it sounds like. Steve Levine, who produced Culture Club, was a very hot producer at the time. Apparently Bruce got in touch with him. It was Bruce's idea to work with him, which I find fascinating. But they got him. And they started recording songs throughout most of 1984 into early 1985 throughout London and LA. A handful of tracks didn't make the cut. They did a cover of At the Hop, which with Mike on lead vocals, which didn't make it, and a song called Oh Lord, which Brian wrote with Dennis in 1982. That didn't make it either. But the album itself did fairly well for itself. It peaked at number 52, which was their best showing since 15 Big Ones a decade earlier, 9 years earlier. So it really was one of their best charting albums. And single-wise, Get You Back did really well for itself, number 26. A pretty solid showing. It's Getting Late, hitting number 82, I believe. But I think what bolstered the popularity of those tracks would be the advent of the music video. This was the first time the Beach Boys put out an album on CD and had music videos associated with their songs. So, in the early days of MTV, this was a big deal because back then MTV was only videos, didn't have original content of different programming for shows they created. That came years later, but at that point, it was just the radio with a video associated with it. You put on MTV and that's what it was. You saw music videos. So it was exciting, and they were excited about that. And they're in the videos for Get You Back, and then Brian's in the video for It's Getting Late. The two tell stories. The main characters are in both videos there. Very interesting format and concept. It wasn't just the band playing their song. They went for a story, and they kind of harkened on the old days, but with a mix of the new. So it was a bit of then and now, which also relates to like the Monkees TV show coming back on at the time, and a lot of that stuff. So nostalgia was maybe a little bit up there for the guys, but they use that nostalgia in a mature way, is what I'm getting to. The album also was a different departure from them in that they recorded a lot of it digitally. There's sampling on here. There's a heavy dose of synthesizers and only a sparse amount of actual instrumentation, with Ringo actually playing drums on California Calling. So that definitely sets the album apart a lot from their other work, and it definitely has a bit of a Love You vibe. I'm going to throw that out there because Love You is synth heavy. That thing was years ahead of its time in terms of what the synthesizer would become for pop music years down the road. And there are moments on this where Brian actually sounds like the Brian of Beach Boys' Love You, which I think is fantastic. But this album I really feel is important for the guys. So yeah, Get You Back, the first song on the album, the first big single that this thing produced, is an absolute showcase of what the guys can do if they put their heads down and did something really, really great. Written by Mike and Terry Melcher. It's an excellent opening track. Those loud crashing drum machines. From what I've read, people have said that's a tribute to Dennis because that's what he would do. He had a loud, percussive, caveman-like beat to his drumming. Mike's vocal on this is perfect. It's powerful, it's confident, it's not too nasally, it's really well sung, it's well executed, and the guys shine. All of them shine. Brian's falsetto was the best it had been in years at that point. It sounds like classic 60s Beach Boys, but with 80s production. And it works. It just works so well. The video was great because it harkens back a little bit on the girl's name is Wendy. It takes place in the early 60s when these two were kids. Then they grow up. They're in their early 20s now. And they re-meet in the video. So, it's definitely got that story time kind of feel, but it works. That's the best thing I can say over and over again. It's got that golden era Beach Boys sound, but now, which was the 80s. So it's got that 80s production, which sounds a bit dated these days, but at the time was extremely exciting because everyone sounded like that. The big, humongous chorusy drums and lots of echo and all that kind of stuff. That's just how it was at the time. But the maturity in the delivery is what's really important. There's nothing cheesy about this song in any respect. And that's what sets it apart from Keeping the Summer Alive as a whole. I mean, this one song has more maturity in it, I think, than a lot of that album. Not the whole thing, but a lot of it. It's a classic. It's an absolute Beach Boys classic. It's Getting Late. It continues. Here's another absolutely fantastic song. So this is where Carl's vocals shine. Carl's voice was made for this 80s version of the Beach Boys, and this song could have easily fit on either of his solo albums. This song is an absolute gem. It's mature, it's rockin', it's catchy, and Carl just freaking nails it. His voice is absolute magic. I mean, someone famously said it, he could sing the phone book. I forget who said that, but it's true. Brian's vocal additions are great. The whole thing, all the harmonies on this thing is just top notch. The whole construction of the song sticks in your brain, and it's so grown up, but it's so fun. It's such a good song. That's the most I'm gonna say about that. Just go ahead and listen to it. It'll blow your mind. Crack at Your Love. Here comes Al for the first time with his first lead vocal here, and it's really not bad. It's definitely got a bit of the cheese there, because production-wise alone, this is how it was. But his voice also translates pretty well to this new world of synth and computer and digital and all that stuff. Um, the song itself steps along pretty well, and the bouncy slap bass underneath all this thing is kind of cool. Brian, for me, saves this track. His little vocal bit sounds very much like something on Love You. Um, it's very Love You-esque in his delivery. It's simple. He kind of repeats the same phrase over and over again, but it works. It just bloody works. Not my favorite song on the album, but really not bad. Not bad at all. Maybe, I don't know. This song is cool. I love the guitar work on this thing. The whole track overall is very polished, very well produced. You might say a little overproduced, but it works. I love the chord changes. I love the atmosphere on this thing. It's sophisticated, mature pop. It sounds like guys in their early 40s with something to say, with their heart in their sleeve, and that works really well for the guys. It's a welcome change for them. It's a welcome sound. It's a great first step in a new direction. They could have done a whole album like this, and it would have been amazing. It's really fun to hear them do something a bit different. That's why I like Carl's solo albums, because you get that familiar voice, but with a bit of a different bend to what you're used to, and that makes for a really fun listen. And Maybe I Don't Know is a great example of that. This could have been a single, hands down. She Believes in Love Again. This is a cool song. This is Bruce's contribution. He's got a gritty vocal quality going on here, which I'm not sure whose idea that was, but it definitely takes a bit of the sweetness off the overall theme of the song, and definitely the angelic quality of Carl's voice in the chorus. Having Bruce have a bit of a gritty delivery is really cool. One, because it's different to hear him do that, but two, it definitely adds a whole different texture and dynamic to the overall sound of the track. Not sure whose idea that was to do that. Maybe Bruce's, but totally works. And Carl on the choruses is great. This was a single, but it should have been a much bigger single. I could totally see this on the radio. Side 2 starts off with California Calling. This, for me, is the weakest song on the album. This is one of the only songs on the album with a lot of actual physical instruments on here besides samples and drum machines and keyboards and stuff. But Mike's delivery is a bit too cheesy for me. Al saves it a little bit, but this song does not fit on the album at all. It's got way too much nostalgia in a we're copying ourselves kind of way, and not in a, yeah, remember that? Yeah, we'll talk about it, but we got a whole new sound now. That vibe is lost on this song. This one sounds way too much like something on Keeping the Summer Alive or MIU or something like that, where they're hearkening on the past and kind of taking ideas from what they've already done, and just doing it over again. So, not my favorite song on the album. Some people really enjoy it, and that's great. Knock yourself out. But not for me. Passing Friend. A lot of people don't like this one either. I think it's alright. I mean, it's definitely kind of a sad song, especially with Dennis Wilson having passed less than a year and a half before this album came out. Carl's voice just works on this one as well. It's definitely an 80s synthified tune. Synthified, there's a word for you. It's catchy, it's memorable, it's really not too bad. It definitely sticks in your head. Not my favorite song on the album either, but it definitely continues that mature vibe that they were going for. I'm So Lonely is Brian's first solo song on here, solo vocal on this album. It definitely harkens on like a 50s doo-wop kind of feel, but with an 80s production, and it's one of those songs for me where the more I've listened to it, the more it grows on me. It's a very short and sweet song, which is kind of nice and adds to, the want to listen to it again and again. It's not my favorite song, and I have to admit the saxophone solos for me are a bit over the top, a bit cheesy for me. Just my little tiny opinion, but I do like the descending bridge chords, and Carl on here is really good too, but not my favorite, but it definitely grows. It's definitely a grower kind of a song. Where I Belong. This song is absolutely fantastic. Holy moly, what a song here. Excellent vocals from everybody, including Carl doing the lead, but the background harmony vocals are just spot on classic Beach Boys, but as grown-ups. The Beachmen, if you will. It's tender, it's loving, it's soulful, and it stands out in such a good way. This should have been a single. This could have been a really big song for the guys if the promotion was behind it in a, heavy way. Excellent way to see the guys as mature grown-ups with something to say and a way to say it, and continuing that, we're current feel. Just works. I Do Love You. This is oh, I just realized some of these are in different order. I played the CD as well as doing the record, so some things are out of order here. I Do Love You. This was written by Stevie Wonder, and it sounds like a Stevie Wonder song. It's fantastic. It's got those warm key changes that he's known for, and that characteristic Stevie vibe that you just feel like you're comfortable and you know the guy listening to his music. I read somewhere that apparently management or somebody said Stevie can't sing with you guys. It wouldn't sound right. And to which Carl and Al and me and the entire world was like, what? Stevie Wonder on a Beach Boys album would be fantastic. They did I Was Made to Love Her 20 years before this. It would have been perfect to have Stevie on the album. It would have been so cool. I think you hear him doing a couple like ad-libs in the background, but he plays harmonica on it, and his harmonica is just fantastic. It's spot on, amazing. Yeah, you definitely get that classic Stevie magic, and there's moments where Carl sings it almost in a Stevie way, which is really cool. I think it's a great song. Absolutely fun song. And what we got next is Just a Matter of Time, the last actual song on the album. This is definitely the slow dance, slow tune time, and I really, really like this one. Mike's vocal on this is great. It definitely sounds like the guys doing a 50s, little doo-wop thing. It's a super short song, but a fantastic way to end the album, and it's good to hear Mike back on a lead vocal, having been absent for most of the album, besides Get You Back. Very enjoyable end to the LP. A really good display of their vocal ability with all of them at the same time. So that's where the album ends. The CD continues with the B-side of Get You Back. Let me hold the CD up here. Got my collection of gear here. The CD, this was the first album they ever produced on CD, a new album. Their first new album on CD. And this boasted the track Male Ego. The B-side of Get You Back. It's an interesting song. I mean, Mike has some good vocals on it. Carl's background vocals are really solid, but what stands out is Brian's lead vocal. He's got this kind of excited, impassioned, almost manic lead vocal, which we hear way more of on his solo album a couple years later. It's not terrible, but it's certainly B-side status for me. A lot of people really like this song, but a lot of people hate it. I'm just kind of meh on it. There's one line in there where it's like, chase those tasty ladies, we'll be doing it in our 80s. Like, it just comes across as really cheesy. Not feeling that line at all. But, yeah, beyond that, it's kind of an song. So let me show off my collection here. I've got almost all of the released versions of this album that came out at the time. But here's the inside. This is the original 1985 disc with the Caribou CBS label on there. And the booklet. The booklet's cool because, back then, for those of you who weren't around when CDs first came out or never got to see original CDs back in the day, a long time ago, they used to tell you how to care about CDs. So they'd say, hey, this is how you care for it. Don't touch the bottom. Play the side that's got no writing on it. Because for a lot of people, this was a whole new world. So, to not have to flip your disc over and you just put it in once and leave it, foreign. Completely foreign to people. But very cool to have an original copy of this thing. It's pretty fun. And the inside here, there was a contest that the Beach Boys did called Keeping the Summer Alive Photo Contest, where some people submitted pictures of Beach Boys-esque, California-esque things. But the quality of the pictures in here is just absolute crap. You can't even see people's faces. Like, they're the black and white pictures, but the photocopying, whoever was in charge of the Xerox machine that day, just didn't do too good of a job. So that's what the CD looks like, and here's the back cover. There you go. Great picture of the guys. Brian looking cool with his little beard there. Mike and Al having shaved off their beards for the first time in forever. The record, so as I was holding this before here, inside of the LPs, the photocopying's better on this one. You can see the little kid's sunglasses in this one, but you get the lyrics in here just as you do with the CD as well. And then there's the label, the old school Caribou label. Their last album on that label. And really cool logo, the Beach Boys. So there's that one. And I've also got the cassette So that's very cool to see a cassette or the cover like that. Instead of being the short little thing with, like, the song titles at the bottom, they kind of condensed the cover. They just expanded it because it just says the name of the band. Very cool. The classic red side, which every tape from the 80s has this kind of look. And the back just says nothing. It just says the barcode and the Caribou Ranch logo. And then you got the tape itself. And the jacket, the J sleeve, doesn't have any lyrics on it. It just gives you information about, what's going on with who did what, who plays what, that kind of thing. So that's pretty cool. And then I've also got more. This is the single for Get You Back. Picture sleeve, looks just like the album cover, with Male Ego on the back. And not much to look at here either. Apparently this was owned by someone named G. Harrison, so good to know I own George Harrison's personal copy of the 45 of Get You Back. I always wanted to own that from George. And then Male Ego on the back. I've got a second copy, just without the sleeve. So that's my whole self-titled Beach Boys collection there. Overall, a really important album, and really the last album of the 80s. I mean, Still Cruisin' has a handful of original songs on it, but there's other stuff on there from previous albums. And then Summer in Paradise came a few years later, 1991, and Brian's not even on that thing. So this was the last, Brian Wilson Beach Boys album until That's Why God Made the Radio. Basically, I mean, he's on Stars and Stripes, but that's a whole different album review. Overall, very interesting album. Not my favorite, but there are some very, very strong tracks on here. Get You Back, It's Getting Late. Basically, all of side 1 I think is fantastic. And then side 2, you got, Where I Belong, I Do Love You, It's Just a Matter of Time. There's some really solid tracks on this thing. For an album that feels largely forgotten in the Beach Boys canon, this is definitely worth a listen. I'd easily give this thing probably a 7, maybe an 8 out of 10. I don't feel like it's essential, but I do feel like it's important to their career because they were blowing up with MTV at this time. Their concerts were still a humongous draw, and right after this they were doing more for movie soundtracks, and then a couple years later with Kokomo. So this era of the Beach Boys, the mid-80s, was a very, very popular time for the guys. They were on top of the world for a while there, for a group of guys in their 40s, still dominating the market in terms of greatest hits albums and shows. Having a new album out to show their growth and maturity was very wise. I think Carl probably was very happy with this album because it was a completely different departure from the band that they were 5 years earlier. So that's it. My name is Giggens. This has been a very long video. Thank you so much for watching. I know I ramble with some of these things, but there's a lot to say. And that's it. I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. The Beach Boys, 1985. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.